Okay, here we go. This is the Justice Journalist with For Justice Radio, and just to segue into this show, we have been having issues with Blog Talk Radio. Apparently, our access to Blog Talk Radio has been disrupted, so to speak. And I will explain that in another show. So we are going to nevertheless continue with our discussion, Black-White Supremacists. I have with me here my esteemed guest, or I will call my co-host temporarily, Mr. Ricardo Jones. How are you, Mr. Jones?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic, Justice Journalist. Anytime I can be with you and put information out that can help our community, I mean, that's a great day. Information is power, and we need to keep that power and get that power out to our community.
Okay, wonderful. I want to start off with introduction of this program, and I also want to mention someone who will be discussed, and his concepts and ideas will be discussed in various segments, because I'm a follower of his work. Has greatly influenced me, and that would be Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I will include information about where to find more resources regarding Mr. Fuller's work. He has produced a book that is called The Code, in short, and you can get that book on the website producejustice.com. And Mr. Fuller has been very insightful regarding the issue of racism, white supremacy. And Mr. Fuller says that white supremacy is a system that we are all living in or under, and that basically it's a prison system. And that the prison system it has its purpose to treat non-white people, black people, people of color, to mistreat them, and that this mistreatment is done for fun, for profit, and to obtain glory, for profit, for fun, and for glory. And Mr. Fuller also says that since we're all non-white people are under this system, that a black person cannot be a white supremacist. However, that is something I disagree with. And Mr. Fuller has also said that we can create words and definitions as long as we can come up with the information to clarify what we mean. So this is the definition that I have come up with regarding what a black-white supremacist is, if I can share that. So a black-white supremacist is a non-white person who actively seeks to support the system of white supremacy by spying on or doing harm or misdirecting non-white people in order to gain the things that the white supremacists can give to that person. So although we are all under the system of white supremacy, and we may, by being under that system, inadvertently assist the system, not every person is actively spying on or seeking to harm other non-white people. So that being said, Mr. Jones, what do you think about that definition?
Justice Jones, I think that's a very good definition there, because what we have today is, we have our own people, and we got people of color who basically are cooperating with the supremacists, whether they're white supremacists or whatever you want to call them, because I think a supremacist is a supremacist, period. But that basically are helping white supremacy to succeed, right? And I don't think, white people need to do it themselves now, because they have our own people of color, who basically perpetuate the white supremacist system that's been in place for, 300-400 years to be successful. And they don't feel that there's anything wrong with it. It used to be being an Uncle Tom, and that's what we used to call those people that support the white supremacist system and basically rat out their own people and go to Mr. Charlie and Miss Ann and tell them what's going on. We used to call them Uncle Toms and Aunt Jemimas. And, and it wasn't a large number of them. They were in the minority. But today, the Uncle Toms and that we used to call and the Aunt Jemimas are in the majority. And it's a style to be in style today is to say that you're an Uncle Tom or an Aunt Jemima, and you don't mind selling out your own people, doing your own people in, and keeping your own people down and beating your own people down. I was told it's called tap dancing. When a black person takes advantage of another black person to keep them down or to beat them down, they call it tap dancing. And tap dancing is going on all the time. So, yeah, I agree with you 100% with your definition. I mean, it's just that today I don't think our problem is seriously with the people that were in Charlottesville so much. I think our problem are the people that look like us. I'm more afraid of the people that look like us than I'm afraid of the people, the skinheads and the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, because I feel that, seeing them, I mean, I can deal with that. It's the people that look like me that basically are selling me out and stabbing me in my back and doing me in and betraying me that are the ones that can hurt me the most.
Right. I believe that Mr. Fuller says that white supremacy goes through several stages. I think he said it was 3 stages. I may not be quoting him accurately, but I do know that one of the stages is refinement. And I believe what you are addressing is the refinement stage. So, for example, we may think that when we see skinheads or people who are out marching, neo-Nazis, for example, and we look at them and we say, oh, that is the system of white supremacy, when it in fact is more subtle than that. The subtlety in the black community, if we could say, we're just saying black community, for example, or black people who are actively participating, as opposed to people who are just going to work every day because, everything that we get out of the white supremacist system. But there are people who, and I know some of those people, who have, for example, gotten paid, and some people don't get paid. Some people just are so enamored, I suppose, with the white supremacist system that they take active participation. And some of those ways that they actively participate are not known to black people at large. And I'll give you an example. A lot of people, for example, on YouTube, have shows, and these shows do not address the everyday issues that plague black people. So, for example, we may discuss spirituality on YouTube, and we may discuss entertainment on YouTube. All the while, there are problems that blacks and other non-whites are facing that we are not addressing. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Jones?
Oh, yeah. Sure. It's about basic issues. It's about food, shelter, and a place to live, and safety, and just basic needs. And we've gotten away from these basic needs. We don't even take into consideration people who don't have the basic needs. And we've gotten beyond all of that. We're more concerned with on Facebook and on YouTube about, what style you're wearing, who's going where, and who's doing what. and we're not using YouTube and Facebook to uplift our people. You judge how good a community is doing, or a group of people is doing, or a race is doing by the least in that race. We have basically started a caste system and a class system where the upper class determine basically what the needs are of the lower class, right? That's the serfs. You have the lords and the dukes and the queens and the bishops, right? And then you have the serfs, right? And the serfs are the poor people, and the serfs are not even considered. See, the French had a revolution that basically said that the king and queen ended up losing their heads, and Marie Antoinette had her head cut off, and many people in France after the French Revolution, because the queen said that the poor people, let the poor people eat cake. That's how much she was concerned with them, with all the money that she was spending and all the glamorous parties that she was having, the hairdos she was having, and the dresses. So in the end, they had to have a revolution, and that revolution was basically the queen got her head cut off, the king got his head cut off, the children of the king and the queen, they got their heads cut off, and many people got their heads cut off. And the person who did the most head cutting off was a guy by the name of Robespierre, and Robespierre had his head cut off. So I mean, that's the extreme that we're at right now, where the ruling class, the elite, the people with the money determine basically what needs, wants, and desires the people on the bottom can have, and we don't even talk about the people on the bottom seriously. I mean, we don't ever talk about them. We don't talk about the black poor. The black poor don't even count anymore. I mean, they just to be manipulated by the black elite, the black middle class, and the black upper class, and the black intellectual class, right? So they determine basically what the needs, wants, and desires are for the black poor.
I agree with that. Again, Mr. Fuller says that this white supremacist system is based off the royalist system. So your analogy of the French Revolution, I think, is a very apt analogy. And I would also add that, when you use the term black elites and things of this nature, those things really do not exist. They exist in the minds of the people who fancy themselves as, quote unquote, above everyone else because of whatever material gains the white supremacists have given to them. But as we have discussed offline, those things can be taken away at any time. So for people to think, especially black people, to think that they, because they have a certain amount of money that they make on their jobs, or that they're driving a certain car, or that they live in a particular zip code, that they actually have anything of any real value, that is a joke, because that really does not exist. Would you have any comments regarding that statement, Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I mean, what goes up will come down, and anything they give you, somebody gives you, they can take it away from you. So those people who think by, basically selling out their own community and becoming Uncle Toms and Aunt Jemimas or ingratiators, there's a lot of nice things you can say or call them, that because they drive nice cars and live in nice houses and they feel they have to tap dance on the backs of the black poor or the people that are poor, that they're really doing something, right? And to keep all their crumbs from the master's table and stuff, right, they're willing to do whatever they have to do. But everything that the master gives them, the master can take from them and stuff, right? So the reality is, is again, what goes around comes around, and so you can't succeed on somebody else's back. If you have to feel good about yourself by stepping on the neck of somebody else, then you're going to not survive anyway. There's always been scapegoats. The Nazis had scapegoats. We've had scapegoats in this country, African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans. They bring in a new group of people that they can use as a scapegoat. But the reality is that's all your claim to fame. then, you know, you're not going to survive anyway. In time, you're going to become a scapegoat. I mean, Hitler didn't just kill Jews. He killed black people, too. He killed about 50,000 black people in the concentration camps and in the gas chambers. They don't even talk about the 50,000 black people that Hitler exterminated, right, that were from the German colonies out of Africa that had immigrated to Germany that he decided to kill, too. So, I mean, you know, again, we have just got too comfortable with selling each other out, and we don't hold each other accountable. You don't hear anybody talking about what the real poor black issues are. I mean, we have a lot of journalists that are on TV, a lot of commentators that are on TV. Do you think they talk about poor black people's issues? You got black people in Detroit that don't even have clean water to drink, you know, and in Michigan. They don't have water. They don't have basic needs, basic things, right? And those issues don't even come out. Nobody's concerned with it. And then they want to worry about people who've been brought here from another country and that came here illegally and that their children were brought here illegally, and we shut down the whole federal government over that issue, the birthers issue. Right? And I'm not saying that they don't have needs and they shouldn't be considered in the big picture of things, but what about the African-American people in Detroit that don't even have water to drink? Nobody's talking about that, and that's not going to cause the government to be shut down. You know, we're about the people that are African-American people and people of color who are underemployed. They may be employed, but they're underemployed. Right? So that means they're not even making what they should be making. These issues are not even coming out. I don't hear anybody talking about poor black issues or black issues in the black community. We're 12% of the population, and I don't hear anybody even addressing our issues whatsoever. And I happen to live here in New Jersey now, and I know that the people that are living the American dream are not African-American people living the American dream. I mean, there's a small percentage that are living the American dream, but those who are living the dream are not even concerned with the black poor anymore. They don't even talk. I've been to many churches. I don't hear the minister talking about the poor people in the community and what we need to do to help the poor black people in the community in a black church. So, you know, nobody's addressing the real issues in our community because we're pretending that we don't have black poor people anymore for some reason.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And what I think, looking at the situation, what this is really doing, and we will address this more on our website, usablackgenocide.com. If you have not taken a look at our website as we construct that, I would suggest you do that, because we will be talking about the complete and total elimination of civil rights for blacks in the United States, with the elimination by the federal government of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VI. And hopefully Mr. Jones will join us for a separate broadcast regarding that particular issue. But what is actually happening is that by distracting black people and getting us to forget the quote-unquote the least of us, that we're setting ourselves up for failure. Because do not believe for one moment that after, whether you want to call it the government or the system of white supremacy, which is basically the same thing, don't think for one moment that once you are enticed to agree that you can turn your back on people that look like you, that you are going to be safe. That would be quite foolish on your part. Do you have any comments regarding that, Mr. Jones?
Yes. You know, I always use the analogy, and you know, I'm going to use the Jewish people, right? And you know, just prior to World War II and stuff, you know, and Hitler came into power because Germany had lost World War I, or there had been, you know, and they felt that they shouldn't have lost the way that they did, and then the Allied nations imposed this, you know, the sanctions against Germany and stuff. Well, Hitler came into power by, you know, saying the real problem was the Jews, but Hitler wasn't the only one. Henry Ford the great Henry Ford, the Ford Motor Company, he was one of those individuals that felt the same way that Hitler did about Jewish people. Of course, we don't talk about that, right? So I don't want to go too far into that, right? That's the America First. Anybody Googles America First, the same things that are being said today will understand what I'm saying. But the analogy is, right, is that he had exemptions for certain Jewish people, just like black people with education, and the more education they have and the more so-called money that they have, they're exempt. They're not going to get treated. The police don't basically shoot down black people with college degrees and money and driving nice cars, certain types of cars, right? Well, Hitler basically said that if you had fought in World War I, you had a certain amount of medals, and if you didn't have a certain amount of blood, Jewish blood in you, if one parent was Jewish and one parent wasn't, then you were exempt. But as things got harder and harder on the Nazi regime, he started rolling back those exemptions, and that's what's happening to us now. See, all these things that make it so that black people are not going to be treated like poor black people, and not being shot down in the street, not losing everything, and not being treated badly in the court system because they can afford lawyers and stuff. Just like in Nazi Germany, it's being rolled back also. And then in the end, and he had Nazis that were Jews. He had to have some Jews helping him to get rid of Jews because there wasn't enough Germans to get rid of all the Jews. So he had to have Jews that helped him get rid of other Jews, right? So the same thing with us. He has black people to get rid of other black people and to beat other black people down and to undermine other black people and stuff, right? But eventually, the system gets to those who sell out each other. So, again, what we have to understand is when we have to have accountability in our community. We don't have accountability anymore. I don't like really going to other groups of people, and I don't even like really talking about white supremacists so much. I talk about supremacists because our problem is with the people that look like us, that are put in position to keep our people down and beat our people down. And they do it with impunity and immunity right now because we don't hold anybody accountable. And when you don't hold people accountable, then other people start admiring those people who are undermining our community and say, I'm going to emulate them. I want to be a sellout just like them. I want to beat down other black people because I'll get ahead by doing that. And we don't deal with those issues. We don't talk about those issues. And when we don't talk about those issues and we don't deal with those issues, like those sellout black politicians, the whole Congressional Black Caucus basically does nothing for the black community, and we keep reelecting them. Now, why would we keep reelecting people that are not doing anything for the black community? It's ridiculous, but we keep doing it because we say, well, we're happy with tokens because we still in tokenism. So the reality is here is those who feel that there is no accountability and that there is, you're not going to have to answer for the acts that you're doing. And hopefully in a few minutes we're going to get to the details about some people who did some bad things to their own people in the community that paid a very high price. There is a price that you're going to have to pay. But we should be holding people accountable in this life, not in the next life. And, there is a price. And we need to talk more about accountability in our community, among ourselves, and with our family members, and with our government, and with people that look like us.
I definitely agree with that. And, we talk about accountability, and I think we need to be clear on what that is or how we can achieve some type of accountability. Now, Mr. Fuller talked about compensation. And, for example, if you are missing something in one area, there has to be compensation. Something has to be paid back or be paid. And so when I think of accountability in terms of things that we can do, what I envision and what a lot of people here at For Justice Radio envision was that we would provide information about the actions of people who were harming or mistreating people. And so the idea being, or the logic behind that being, that the people who are doing these things are hiding in plain sight, as Mr. Fuller would say. We know who these people are, and we should be able to identify what it is that they are doing that are harming people. We should not glorify people who are harming those who look like them or harming the least of us. So our job here at For Justice Radio is to request that people who are being harmed to file complaints and focus on those individuals who are doing the harming. And that's why we contacted initially several years ago. We got in touch with Mr. Jones, who was at the EEOC and who was, in fact, doing just that. So if you would like to speak to that, Mr. Jones, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Justice Journalist. I want to praise you, Justice Journalist, because you're one of the few people that ever attempted to really do anything about this topic that we just talked about. There's identifying people in our community, basically, that have been selling out our community, undermining our community, making money off of our community, and sometimes they don't even get paid for doing it. They just do it because they think they just like doing it, or they don't know why they're doing it and stuff. You had the wanted list, and you put out a wanted poster on the people that were really doing bad things in our community and harming people in our community, especially people who were underprivileged and didn't have anything. But, you know, the reality to this whole thing is we got to get serious about this. We have to really get serious about this. For some reason, we don't want to point out bad people, because sometimes you point out bad people, you have to point out yourself. That means you got to live a better life. You got to live a righteous life. You got to do right to point people out. And a lot of us can't do that. So that's one of the excuses that is being used. Well, I can't see anything bad about anybody else. But what has happened as a result of pointing out a lot of people in our community, they are no longer in the positions that they were in to harm people. But what happens is these people just get a golden parachute, or they move laterally to another position. So maybe they're not in so much of a high-profile position after they've been identified, right? When they are identified, and they're not always identified, but when they are identified, they go laterally. I'm going to tell a quick story here, right? And it's a very quick story that had to do with what I did in the EEOC. And I had done an investigation, right, into a noose being hung in a middle school, a minority middle school in New Rochelle, New York, right? And this Italian supervisor of custodial work, who was crazy and insane, right, had taken a Venetian cord, blind white cord, and made a hangman's noose and hung it around a brown Curious George monkey toy and hung it on a bulletin board in his office where some of the children at the middle school could walk by and see for 7 years, right? And he supervised black custodial workers and other supervisors, and he was a supervisor, manager. And the other black supervisors and the other managers and the black assistant principal and the superintendent of custodial workers, he was a white guy who had a black wife, had been in the army. They all seen the noose around the brown Curious George monkey's neck, and they were afraid to say anything to this guy for whatever reason, whether they thought this guy was in the mafia or connected to the mafia. I don't know what it was that they were afraid of him about, right? But they were afraid of him, and they were afraid to say anything, so they let it hang up there for 7 years. So a young black custodial worker got transferred in there, and he came in there and saw it, and he said, "Man, this is crazy," and just started complaining. But even after he complained, they didn't take it down. And then finally he took pictures of it, and he took it down himself, right? And the guy put up another one, right? And he complained some more, and then they eventually fired him for complaining. He went to the NAACP, and it didn't help or anything, right? But to make a long story short, for some reason, after this guy finally filed a complaint at the EEOC in New York, somehow or the other, I got the case, right? And as soon as I got the case, I realized at that point that somebody needed to be concerned for the children in that school, because the person that could do this, and it could be there for 7 years, could harm some of the children at that school. So I was very concerned for the safety of the children at the school. But guess who the superintendent was? The assistant superintendent of that school district, which was the New Rochelle School District in New York, was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Frank Smith. Mm-hmm. Dr. Frank Smith was from Washington, D.C. And this is to get back to the point that I'm making here. How when you identify people who do wrong and accept wrong and do wrong things, well, Dr. Frank Smith, who was the assistant superintendent of the New Rochelle School District, right, had worked in the D.C. school system before he came to New York. And obviously he had some problems in the D.C. school system, so then, he kind of moved up here to New York, and now he's at the New Rochelle school system there as the assistant superintendent. His father worked with Thurgood Marshall on Brown versus the Board of Education, and he went to Howard, all this good stuff, black guy. And he looks like he's a great black guy, right? But he wasn't. And he had conducted the investigation for the school district about the noose, and that's what they told me. Well, when I got up there and I did the investigation and I talked to the crazy white guy who looked me in the eye, this guy was seriously crazy. He looked me in the eye and he said, yeah, Mr. Jones, I did it. I made that noose, and I put it up. I did it, and I show you how I did it. I show you the string is still by my desk, and he looked me in the eye, and I tell you, I've seen crazy people before, and this guy was seriously crazy, and he's going to tell me, the investigator for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that he did it, and nobody said anything, right? And so I at that point, I said, okay, I'm going to talk to some other people, right? So I talked to the black supervisor that worked there and stuff, and his brother, he had muscles on his ears and all kinds of stuff, very strong brother. And I said, hey, man, you've been working here for 7 years. Did you see the news? First he told me no. Then he told me, well, I'm retiring in another year. Then finally he couldn't look me in the eye, and he finally said, yeah, Mr. Jones, I saw the news. It's been there, and, there's a whole bunch of things going on. So, and then after I talked to him, I talked to the superintendent in charge of custodial workers, who was white and had a black wife. And I didn't need to know that he had a black wife and had mixed children, but he wanted me to know that. So I said, well, what difference does it make? I said, have you been in this office and did you see the news hanging up on the bulletin board? He said, no. I said, but how could you come into the office and not see the noose hanging up with the brown Curious George monkey, or the noose around the brown Curious George monkey's neck? He says, well, I didn't see it. I said, well, do you think that this school is safe for your children? He turned purple when I asked him about his children, all right? But getting back to Dr. Frank Smith, when I finally got to Dr. Frank Smith, and I said, okay, Dr. Smith, you did the investigation. I want to talk to you about what you did. He says, well, I can't talk to you in front of the school's lawyer. And I said, okay. And he says, I said, the lawyer looked at him and he said, no, I don't want you. You don't want the school's lawyer. You just want to talk to me privately. So privately, he tells me that he didn't do the investigation. They just signed his name to the investigation, and nothing had been done prior to me really getting there, right? And that they got some serious problems with race in the school system, and that he was going to give me an affidavit once he got back from his honeymoon in Jamaica, right? Well, guess what happened when he got back from his honeymoon in Jamaica, Justice Journalist?
No affidavit.
No, but guess what he got? He got promoted. He got promoted to the fact that he's not the superintendent anymore of the New Rochelle school system. He is now the assistant superintendent. He's now the superintendent of the Sleepy Hollow school system.
Oh, okay. So
since they got his promotion to the next school district, now he's now the head man. He's the HNIC, head HNIC. And he can't give me the affidavit to all of this because they bought him off. But the truth of the matter was, there's some people in Washington, D.C. that knew that Dr. Frank Smith was a sellout and an Uncle Tom and was no damn good, but they allowed him to move up to New York and do the whole thing all over again. And if this gentleman would have killed 5 kids or harmed any children and stuff, kind of like what went on in Atlanta and what went on, all over the country and stuff, right? It wouldn't have made any difference because they decided that they weren't going to identify Dr. Frank Smith, and he may still be with the Sleepy Hollow school system, right? And I still have his business card. I kept it. This is like, probably, 12 years ago. But so we don't do a real good job with accountability. The only thing that I can be honest with you that I made sure was the monster that made the news, that admitted to making the news, the day that I did all the interviews and did my investigation, I told the white superintendent that Dr. Frank Smith worked for that monster couldn't come back to that school from the day that I left. He couldn't return anymore, period. Right? And so, this is how serious this is, right?
No, it's very serious. It's very serious.
It's very, 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 very serious, right? And we have to stop looking the other way. And it's the same things that went on in Nazi Germany and everything. The same exact thing, and we didn't learn anything from that. And we're still repeating this stuff.
Well, and that's an excellent analogy. And the other thing I would like to add to that story is that the more and more we become our values, we take our values from the system, the less and less we begin to care about what's happening to quote-unquote other people. The more we are able to, like you said, what happened with Mr. Smith, get our promotions and turn our heads the other way, the more we believe that we are going to be somehow taken care of by this system, when those things that we have been given by those who are in power in this white supremacist system, those things can be taken away. And I don't think that a lot of people really understand that. I don't know if it's even possible to make an individual understand until they have actually had that experience themselves. What would you say to that?
That's exactly right, Justice Journalist. I talk to a lot of people, family members, friends. I used to have, I think I still have the pictures of the nooses, because the guy put up 3 nooses, and then the one noose with the brown Curious George monkey with the noose around the monkey's neck and stuff, right? And I showed these to a lot. Most of our people were insensitive to this. It didn't really rationalize to them. But if it would have been their children in that school, or if this guy would have harmed one of their children, or it applied to them personally, it would have been a different situation, And so, nobody took it really personal, until it affects you. We don't see it until it affects us. We don't worry about any of these things until, something happens to us. We don't see us as victims. We don't see ourselves as being poor anymore. And as you and I used to talk, when we lived in the projects, we had nothing but community and love and brotherhood and sisterhood and fellowship and all kinds of things were going on great in the projects because we didn't have anything. Everybody was on the same level. We were all poor, and we just took care of each other in that community, and we had love. And the moment that we stepped one step out of those projects, we threw all of those good values and those good things and the good morals and the community and the love out the window, and we lost it. And that's the problem that we have today. Once we got a little bit, 10 cents more than somebody else, then we're going to say we're better than somebody else, and we don't care anymore what goes on in our communities and stuff, right? Because the reality is we have enough votes in our community that we could fix all the problems that we have. We have enough money in our communities today that we can basically financially fix a lot of the problems that we have today. And if people, whether they're white supremacists or whoever they are not treating our people good in in our communities or in any community, you know what? We have enough money to boycott them to change that situation. We do, and we have enough votes to vote people out that are in office. Right, but we don't want to do that. We don't want to hold people accountable. We don't want to talk about the poor. We don't want to talk about things that are bad. We don't want to talk about nooses. But we're concerned about the birthers, right? Nothing wrong with the birthers, but the reality is we got some homegrown problems here that we have to deal with also. But But our issues don't seem to matter. We don't seem to receive the full benefits and rights and privileges of citizenship that the 13th and the 14th and the 15th Amendment to the Constitution say that we're supposed to receive. And I didn't hear anybody talking about that. I didn't hear anybody in the Obama administration talking about that. I didn't hear him talking about that. I never heard him talking about civil rights. I never heard his wife talking about civil rights. I never heard Eric Holder talk about civil rights. I never heard Loretta Lynch talk about civil rights. I didn't hear these people who were supposed to be civil rights people talking about this stuff, and I just wonder why. And these were all black people, and they didn't even talk about it. But now that we have President Trump in there, all of a sudden, they want all the answers and everything straightened out overnight. And I know he says some things off of the cuff that kind of piss a lot of people off and stuff, right? But guess what? There are things that are being done and said worse than what he's doing and saying. So,
I'm glad you mentioned that. What I saw in this, or what I see in this whole spectacle is a couple of things. Number one, what you said about we are not looking at ourselves. That's number one. It seems that with this Trump situation, when we have a boogeyman that's outside, that's basically doing and saying the things that we are doing and saying to ourselves, then it becomes an issue. But when we are the ones that are our own worst enemy, we don't want to look at it and say, you know what, our problems within our community, we're just using the term loosely community, are this X, Y, and Z. And this is how we should address it. But when someone else comes and says, I don't like your community, or your community is worthy of contempt, or it's negative, then we want to start marching. So basically, until someone else is saying something that we don't like, and I look at that as you're trying to get validation from outside. So we got a boatload of problems and a boatload of issues that you just said we could handle those issues. We have the ability to correct our own issues, to identify the problems and to correct the problems. But we don't want to do that. As a matter of fact, when we have someone in office that looks like us and who is actually causing problems, then we're okay with that. But when we have someone that doesn't look like us, who is part of the system, then we're up in arms. And that just, to me, that's a level of insanity. How would you address that?
Well, Justice Journalist, first of all, we got to have some self-respect, self-esteem, and self-worth, right? And when you don't have those three things, right, then you can't really point the fingers at anybody, right? And the things that have been said, if that's all we had to worry about, I don't think we have anything to worry about. I'm talking about the real issue, the real serious issues like the water issue, jobs issue, infant mortality, pregnancy issues. We got a serious problem with black females that are becoming pregnant before they graduate high school and while they're in high school. I heard it's like 50% or higher. And we don't talk about these things, right? And again, if we can't fix our own problems, then we can't go run into anybody else. We just had 8 years of an administration that looked like us. Well, they looked like us at certain positions, but at the lower positions where things were really supposed to happen, it really didn't look like us. And then you had corrupt agencies like the EEOC, and I can only give that example because I worked there for 9 years, right, that had a large number of black people that were there. But the black people that were there were kind of, they felt it was all right to dismiss all the black complaints and stuff. So, if we had a president for 8 years and we could not resolve any of the issues that were related to black people, right, in that 8 years, as Valerie Jarrett says, Barack Obama wasn't the president for black people. But 98% of the black community voted for him 2 times. 98%. 98% of any other community, right, any other group would have voted for him. He would bent over backwards. Is that not right?
Yeah, well, he did. I think he put into place some laws or policies that benefited other groups.
Yeah, I heard he wrote 1,000 executive orders. How many executive orders did he write for black people?
None to my knowledge.
None. And we're still waiting. You still have black people today that says, on the last day that Barack Obama's in office, he's going to do something for black people that voted for him. 98% voted for him, right? And, he's gone now over a year, and it didn't happen. And you don't hear anybody talking about that he didn't do anything for the black community, he didn't do anything for the group that voted for him the most, right? And because, we don't hold people accountable. So now he's gone. We got a white president in there, and we're going to go to the white president with our hats in our hands and say, you shouldn't talk about us. You need to do everything under the sun for us. Less than 1% of black people voted for Donald Trump. Less than 1%. And what can we ask for him? We didn't do nothing for him, and we can't expect him to respect us. You can't. He did go to some black churches. He did talk to the NAACP. He did, say he was going to do some things in the black community. Barack Obama didn't even talk to the NAACP. He sent Joe Biden. And Joe Biden, who's Joe Biden? Joe Biden has never done anything great in the black community before, but Barack Obama didn't have time to even go to talk to the NAACP. He didn't have a policy that affected the black community. He's the only president in all the presidents, I think it's 45, right, that didn't have a policy that affected the black community. I guess he didn't have to because he was black, or he's black. So he didn't have to have a policy because he would automatically do stuff for black people, but he didn't automatically do anything for black people. So this is that accountability thing. We're not, and it's not just him, because there's so many people in his administration, so many people that could have done something, and they didn't. And there's so many people who never said anything about it. A lot of the ministers didn't say anything about it when he started doing things for gay people and homosexuals and transvestites. They didn't speak out on those issues. And when the issues came up with the other ministers that were engaged in pedophilia in their churches, like in Atlanta, and, nobody spoke up. And a lot of the people that came out from the closets after the Supreme Court decisions and after the president administration supported them, how about all the things that they had done, right, that they were hiding and lying? Nobody said that, why'd you lie all those years? Why didn't you come out from way back when and say that you were a member of this certain type of lifestyle? Nobody held them accountable for anything, for the lies and the deceit that they used. No accountability whatsoever. So, again, I'm not so much worried about what people say. I'm worried about what they do and what they don't do. And we have to be more concerned with what people do and what they don't do. And it's like the deal with the switch in the projects. When I was bad, go get the switch. Go get the switch. And that's how we learn right from wrong. And if somebody in my neighborhood saw me do something bad, they may switch me and they take me home to get switched again. So, where is that? Where is that accountability? It doesn't exist anymore.
Well, I agree with you, but I also, just listening to you speak and seeing, we have a mini class that we're going to post soon about 3 reasons why blacks shouldn't celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. And the issue that comes to mind is that we seem to always want someone else to step in to do something for us. And I'm going to give this example for Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. And it goes back to the information on our website, USA blackgenocide.com. Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VI, is a tool that individuals can use to file complaints when their rights have been violated based on race. It's basically helping to protect your 5th and 14th Amendment rights. Without going into any additional information on that, which we'll do in upcoming videos, that's something that can be used by individuals. But the tools that we have as individuals to assist ourselves, and in assisting ourselves, this is going to be a process. We've discussed this before. There's not going to be any overnight solutions in a lot of cases. It's a process, and a process that requires sacrifice. And the sacrifice just may be your time to go online and research things. It may be taking the time to write a complaint. It may be taking the time to help someone else who is in need. But it seems that instead of going into the process and sacrificing something, instead of doing that, we want to go to someone and say, we want you to do this for us. And by and large, that is not working. So what really confounds me is that we continue to do the same things that do not work, and I guess we expect a different result. And I don't understand that. Do you have any insight as far as that's concerned?
Yes, Justice Journalist. I mean, we can't continue to do things that don't work. Now, there have been many people out there like yourself and me that expose the corrupt process that's in place that does not enforce the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and for black people, because the civil rights laws work for other people. It just doesn't work for us, right? But once we expose that it doesn't work, right, then we have to go about this thing in a different way. We can't go about it in the same way that we went about it before. And, you know, and many of our black politicians know about the EEOC and how it doesn't work. And guess what? They cover up for the corrupt process. And, you know, we have to come together and we have to figure out other ways. So what you have to do, and this is what I would say to do, is, first of all, you got to talk to people like the Justice Journalists and myself to help you and others. There are other people out there help you to resolve your own issues yourself, because you can't go to other people. You have to be able to resolve it yourself. You have to learn how to negotiate. You got to learn how to deal with the corrupt government system, the bureaucracy of the corrupt government system. And you have to make it work. And then we have to start holding our politicians and politicians, period, accountable for this, because they don't even talk about those things, right? That the government is corrupt and it's not working, the EEOC is corrupt and it's not working. If they're dismissing 97% of all the race complaints that are filed, that means only 3% they're not dismissing. I mean, just those numbers alone tells you that there is something seriously wrong. And I'm going to tell you, after I was fired from the EEOC for exposing and whistleblowing on the EEOC and stuff, right, I applied for other jobs in civil rights at certain private employers and private corporations. And I went to Starbucks, right? And Starbucks was looking to hire an EEO investigator, right? And I applied and everything, and they called me up and they said, well, you know, Mr. Jones, you're overqualified. I said, what do you mean I'm overqualified? They said, yeah, we don't really need somebody of your experience. What we need is anybody. You know, we can hire an intern. We can hire somebody just out of college. We can hire somebody off the street, because the EEOC really doesn't have qualified investigators, and they don't do a good job anyway. So if they're not doing a good job at the EEOC, why do we need somebody with your expertise and your experience? It's not necessary, right? Because they're not doing anything anyway, right? So this is, you know, Starbucks, right? Major corporation.
It's a catch-22. And what you're saying, the light bulb just went off. We are not helping each other. So ultimately, there's not going to be any use for you in their system. So it hasn't happened to people yet, but it's going to happen. It may be happening, but no one is saying anything. And the silence on YouTube and other quote-unquote media outlets is deafening. You and I discussed this before about the Me Too campaign. I was waiting for people of color to step up and to create a platform to say, well, you know what, this is just not happening to actresses in Hollywood. This system of taking advantage of people is happening to people of color in entertainment, in politics, in different areas of activity. And there's absolutely nothing unless there's some story that's being told that I'm not aware of. And I scour YouTube for these issues. But what is shocking to me is that we who claim that we need assistance from others are not putting this information out ourselves. We have video cameras, we have cell phones, we have computers, and people of color, black people, are not putting this information out. What do you have to say to that, Mr. Jones?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, we have the means to solve these problems ourselves, but here's the reality. We have a great deal of black attorneys today. But you know what? I think the last attorney I'll go to is a black attorney, right? Because they know the system is corrupt, and for them to survive in a corrupt system, they got to be even more corrupt against their own people. So the reality here is, again, we've become our own worst enemies here. I always give the thing there, I've met the enemy and the enemy is us. It's us. And what we have to realize is until we can accept fixing these problems ourselves, we're not going to get anywhere. We have the ability to fix it ourselves. We can fix it, and we have to fix it. The EEOC is not the only government agency that's corrupt. We have a check and balance system in government, and we have different agencies and different departments that are supposed to keep check on other departments. How can they all be corrupt at the same time? Well, the truth is they all are corrupt at the same time and stuff, right? So, it's the system that's in place, and it's not corrupt against everybody. It's just corrupt against us black people. And now that they really don't need us because they're bringing in other people from overseas, and that's why some of the things that Donald Trump says, we can't really get too upset about it because the reality is the people that are coming in from these other countries and stuff are taking the jobs that we have never gotten anyway. So, we got a problem. And we got to solve our problem. We got to hold people accountable. We got to hold ourselves accountable. We got to go back to God. We got to go back to those values in the projects and the community that we had in the projects and the love that we had for each other. We got to learn how to love ourselves first. We got to learn how to respect ourselves so we can respect others. But until we start doing those basic things, we can't be pointing the fingers at other people. We got to clean our houses first.
I definitely agree with that. And on that note, I'm going to, I did want you to mention before we go about the situation at the EEOC, because we were discussing basically consequences and repercussions of our people that look like us acting against those of us who need help the most. And then we're going to close out and continue this conversation on another episode. So do you remember what we discussed?
Yes. The real issue here is again, the EEOC is the premier civil rights agency for the federal government. Most of the civil rights laws that are enforced at the state and local levels are federal laws, and that the EEOC has total jurisdiction over. And they're dismissing all the black complaints that come in there, right? And it's being done systematically because it's institutional racism. And what that means is basically they're helping the corrupt process. They're helping corrupt businessmen. They're helping corrupt government agencies to keep black people down and keep black people down and to keep black people out and they're only letting some black people through that will basically perpetuate the racism and the supremacy, the white supremacy against the majority of black people. And, we have people in positions, and again, I'm going to give one more quick example. There's a black church in Brooklyn. It's one of the largest black churches in Brooklyn. It's the Emmanuel Baptist Church of Clinton Hill. The minister in charge of that church, which is a brother by the name of Anthony Tufant, and his wife's name she's the church mother, is Muriel Tufant Good, and she's the daughter of the former mayor of Philadelphia, Wilson Good. And she's a high-ranking attorney for the city of New York. She was in charge of special operations and special complaints of federal litigations and discrimination for the city of New York at the corporate counsel's office, right? But the reality of what was going on there was she was the church mother to Jacqueline Barnes, who used to be the chairwoman of the EEOC. And but what was going on in that church, right, is the church mother, right, basically was recruiting black female lawyers to become EEO officers in the city of New York in their different departments to basically dismiss black complaints for the city of New York. But besides the fact that she was recruiting black females out of her church that tied to her husband at the church, so that means she finds a job for somebody in the church, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they would pay tithes to the church and her husband, right? So, but they would dismiss black complaints, right? Because she was the head EEO officer for the city of New York, or one of the head EEO officers for the city of New York. And but besides all of that, she was recruiting black African-American female attorneys that had went to Ivy League law schools, that had permanent hair. That means they didn't wear dreads or braids or afros. They had to have their hair straightened like European white women, so that some of the department heads and the agency heads in New York City government would be able to go out with them, because they don't want to go out with black attorneys from Ivy League schools that their hair is not straightened. And then Jacqueline Barnes, who was the head of the EEOC and the chairwoman, she was a member of that church. And her husband, the Right Reverend Anthony Tufant, got her husband a job at Medgar Evers College, which is a black college in Brooklyn, New York. And Jacqueline Barnes came into the EEOC, and she had a vengeance to dismiss as many black complaints as she could dismiss. And Jacqueline Barnes was the Harvard Law School girlfriend of Michelle Obama. And she was the undergraduate roommate to Yvette Clarke, who is the representative from Brooklyn, the minority whip of the Congressional Black Caucus, who I gave the evidence of the dismissing and the discrimination and the fraud and the corruption at the EEOC to. And so you see, the problem that we have here is that there is no accountability. They're undermining our communities through the church, through the government, federal, state, and local. And these are black people doing this. And a minister in the community is involved. And the church mother is recruiting women for white department heads and agency heads in New York so that they can date them and then dismiss complaints that come through them. I mean, this thing is so bad, it's shameful. But, again, people like myself and the justice journalists have screamed this out from the tops of our lungs and in front of the White House and all kinds of places. And, and some good has come from it, but not enough. So that's the story in a nutshell, and hopefully it's a tragic story, and hopefully we can get something done besides having to go along with this corrupt system. Maxine Waters knew about it. Yvette Clarke knew about it. Elijah Cummings knew about it. Many black politicians knew about it. The NAACP knew about it. And guess what? It still goes on to this day.
And so where did you get the information about the church members, or the head of the church, being involved with this type of activity? Where does that?
I'm going to tell you how I got that information, because God works in mysterious ways. When I was very young, when I was in a daycare program that happened to be out of that church, Emmanuel Baptist Church of Clinton Hill. Unbelievable that happened. But after I did the video that about the corruption at the EEOC, and after we did the Blog Talk radio shows, a member of that church, who happened to have been an attorney, who happened to have been recruited by the church mother, Ms. Muriel Tupont Good, right, who was the church mother of Jacqueline Barnes, right, called me up and gave me the information. And I verified that information, right? And after I verified that information, I put that information out publicly. So there are good people out there. But again, they're not willing to come forward. And she already knew that I had already blew the whistle on the EEOC, and she knew that Jacqueline Barnes was a member of that church, and she knew Jacqueline Barnes, and she knew Miss Muriel Tupont Good because she had recruited her church mother. She gave me the information. And that's how it happened.
Mm-hmm. I want to make sure that we state that, it's an anonymous source that is providing that information, and to underscore that a lot of people do not want to come forward because they face some type of reprisal, and that is one of the disadvantages of being in the system, is that you can see things that are going on, and you're not in a position to assist anyone, and that's something I think the young people need to be told, that we, at least when I was coming up, we were told that, if you get a good education and you go in and you become a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, and there needs to be change implemented, that you could do that from the inside. And apparently, from everything that I have seen and from information that you've told me, and apparently from this person's story, that is not the case. Would you like to speak to that before we close out the show?
Yeah, Justice Jones. That old cliche about, I can go along with the corruption, I can go along with the discrimination, I can turn a blind eye to all these things that are going on, and when I get inside there, then I'm going to fix it. But I can't fix it until I get inside. So whatever I have to do, the end justifies the means to get in there. And when I get in there, I'll fix it. Well, we just went through 8 years of people being in position to fix the problems that we have in our community. And none of the problems that we have in our community got fixed, period. 8 years. And Jacqueline Barnes was the Harvard Law School friend of Michelle Obama. And I'm not trying to just point the finger at Michelle Obama, but she was the undergraduate roommate of Yvette Clarke, who's the minority whip for the Congressional Black Caucus. And those people who say that, well, I got to be anonymous about doing these things, and I can't say names and dates and places and things, right? Then, you're part of the problem. If you're not willing to put any blood in the game, any skin in the game, and you're not willing to stand up there and point the people who are doing wrong. And when I was an investigator, I always asked people, I said, look, when it comes time to get in the courthouse, you got to be able to point the person that discriminated against you based on race, look them in the eye and point at them and say, you discriminated against me based on race. And if you're not able to do that, I don't know how much I can help you. You got to be able to look the devil in the eye and say, you're the devil. But if you're not willing to do that, then, I don't know who can help you, So, we have to stand up and say that when something wrong happens and it happens to somebody else, I'm going to stand up with them. We're going to stand together, and we're going to fight this thing together and win, lose, or draw. And even if I lose, the next person won't be able to get away with it as much as they did with me. So we got to stand up and stand for something in our community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. I really appreciate your coming on and doing this show. And we will, even though we're not on Blog Talk currently, we want to put out this information so that people will have some idea of what's going on, that they will, as individuals, begin to ask themselves questions and solve some of these problems on their own, because as we've already discussed, in case anyone doesn't know, the system is not helping people. As a matter of fact, it seems like the system is actually imploding. There's so many things that are going on in the United States that our concerns are not tantamount. And so it's incumbent upon us to address these issues ourselves. And I would like to, again, thank you. We will be putting these podcasts out periodically, and we hope that you will join us.
I look forward to joining you again in the Future Justice Journalist, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to put out some information that can help us in our community. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.